wanted to do it. How?
Yeah.
Nice shot.
Joining the class?
Yeah.
Very nice.
This is the first class, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Intro
name?
tour.
Avidan, welcome. Okay, this is an extra one. Whoever wants this one, I'm going to use this one. Whoever wants this one.
Come around this way.
This is the one you showed me.
This way.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, this one. This is good. Over here. Here.
Okay, so first, let me tell you what I want to cover today. I'm not going to be covering the system. Whoever was here last class saw that, or if it wasn't, we'll need to make it up somehow. But I'm not covering the system, again, how it works online. We're just going to cover the material of the Basar beChalav. This is basically, we're going to, for real, Mertzim start next week. I'm still waiting to see how the applications are going, how many people are enrolled into the course. But ideally, I want to begin next week, Tuesday, already starting from the beginning. And today is just basically just an overview of Basar beChalav and some demo learning of what it's going to be like.
Are we going to have your books in the workbook by next week? Or?
Everyone who's, well, if you can have by next week. So I order it from the States, and it takes about 2 to 3 weeks. So the good news is that it comes very quick, because it works with Amazon, and they get first priority now in Israel. So it comes pretty quick, but it does take time. So if someone's enrolled and paid, I have to order it. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks.
So we'll make do next week with another method for study.
Until it comes, everything's available online. And again, if in this class, we're going to be going through the material. You're not meant to go ahead. You can learn the whole thing on your own if you want. But my job is to cover everything that you need to know in the classes, and that's what I said. It's going to take about a year. If I was giving you just one topic per chapter, then it would take 8 weeks if we'd finished the whole Basar beChalav. But we're not. This is we're going through everything that needs to be learned. Okay, so first let me just show you what I have on it. So this is what all the Tzemach students receive, including also another book called The Practical Laws of Basar beChalav. It's another book that I put out. This was the first edition. This is the second edition.
You still have this one?
This is my last copy, and somebody you asked for it. Or you asked for it? Who asked for it? You asked for it? You asked for it.
You ordered a bunch of them already.
I'm going to order more. Yeah, we're ordering more. Okay. So this is what we're going to be learning from, including, as I said, we're going to go in and out of the Shulchan Aruch based on necessity. So let me first go into a little bit about Yoreh De'ah, and then we'll go into an overview of Basar beChalav. So Yoreh De'ah is the second section of Shulchan Aruch. In our classes so far for the past 3 years that I've been teaching here, we never formally did a subject in Yoreh De'ah. We touched upon different subjects when we did questions. We were going through different topics, 4 topics a week, if you remember. So we touched upon, of course, many different subjects in Yoreh De'ah, but never formally went through a whole subject from the beginning to end. So this is something new that we'll be doing in this class. Yoreh De'ah is a mixture of many different subjects. Ideally, it is considered the book that's meant for rabbis. Meaning, Orach Chaim is necessary for all Jews to know, not only rabbis. And today, unfortunately, many rabbis don't even know Orach Chaim. But ideally, every single Jew needs to know Orach Chaim. Nothing to do if you're a rabbi or not a rabbi. They need to know for your personal knowledge to know how to live like a Jew. But Yoreh De'ah contains subjects that not everyone is obligated to know, but it also contains subjects that everyone is obligated to know. Let's go through the beginning. The beginning of, let me just first say, kashrus is the main subject of Yoreh De'ah. There's a lot of assorted subjects in the section in the volumes of Yoreh De'ah, but if you want to say which is the main discussion, it's kashrus. There's about 150 chapters dedicated to kashrus in the beginning and in the end. In the beginning, we have the laws of shechita. Now, anyone here who doesn't plan on being a sheichet, there is no need practically for them to learn it, because you're not shechted. Now, of course, Yad Torah v'Yadir, and a Jew has to learn all the Torah Kula. I'm not arguing on that. But in terms of practical halacha, the laws of shechita are not very practical for a non-sheichet. Okay? Then we go to treifus. The laws of treifus is not practical for a non-baidik. Even a sheichet doesn't need to know treifus, because he's not the one determining whether or not the cow's lungs are valid or invalid. He's not the one determining the kosher state of the cow after it's shechted. That is a separate job that's held by a baidik, and usually that's what Rabbanim needed to have this knowledge because they were in charge of the shechtim. They were in charge of the baidikim, and therefore they had to learn these things in order to become a rab. Back in the day, the official subjects of learning to receive smicha were all in Yeridea. All 4 of them were in Yeridea, and they were Malicha, Basar, beChalav, Taruvus, and Treifus. Those were the 4. All involving food, right? And all involving basically meat. Shechting the meat. That they didn't have to do shechita, but just the Treifus has to do with the meat if it's kosher once it's shechted. The laws of Treifus. Then they had to learn the laws of Malicha, salting the meat, knowing how to get rid of the blood. And the laws of Basar, beChalav, it shouldn't be mixed. And the laws of Taruvus, mixtures of meat and milk together. Because the rabbi was usually in charge of the kashrus of the town. So therefore, this is what he had to be an expert in. So 3 of those 4 subjects are barely necessary today for you to know for your lives. Treifus is not necessary at all. What's it going to help for you to learn Hilchos Treifus? When are you ever going to be a baidik of a cow or of a chicken? Doesn't come up. Hilchos Melicha. When are you salting it? Today everything's done in the factory. Hilchos Taruvus, complex questions of mixtures. What you need to know, you can pretty much already get out of Basar beChalav. So that's why those three subjects have always been, those 4 subjects have always been studied, but all smicha programs today have changed and altered that form of study. For example, nobody today requires the learning of Treifus. No smicha program that I know of requires Treifus, except for the one I went through, which wasn't really a program. I did smicha by one of the Rabbanim of Crown Heights privately, Rav Azdaba, and he required the same old school way. So we learned Treifus under him. It was actually a great experience because at the same time that I was doing smicha, I was also, I was in his office for about an hour a day with him. So we went through shilas, different shilas came in. So it was really being on hands on the job of answering, of seeing how he answers shilas, etc. So now I want to go through an overview of Basar beChalav, meat and milk. The laws of Basar beChalav begin from Siman Pei Zayin, chapter 87. Pei Zayin 87, and extends to chapter 97. Okay, so we have 11 simanim here from 87 to 97, all discussing different aspects of Basar beChalav. What are the topics that are discussed? So I'm going to go through the bulks of the chapters and what they discuss. Chapter 87, Pei Zayin, the first one, which is what we're going to be starting next week. It discusses the very basics of what makes a mixture of meat and milk be under the prohibition of meat and milk. Now it sounds like a silly question, meat and milk, right? So let me ask you a question. You're living in Birmingham, Alabama, right? Alabama.
Yeah.
Birmingham, Alabama. You can't get a job. It's a recession. The local McDonald's is offering pay. You want to get a job there. Now, McDonald's doesn't serve kosher food. So you say, I won't eat the food, God forbid. But you'll be cooking. They need a hamburger maker. They need someone to make the hamburgers and put the cheese on top. Can you work in a McDonald's in making this food? So you're saying no.
I'm saying
But
yes.
when we learn Pei Zayin, this enters into the question of which mixtures of meat and milk actually consist of the prohibition of meat and milk. In other words, calling it meat in English and calling it milk in English doesn't pass the bar. There's a whole chapter dedicated to defining the prohibitions, the definitions of meat, the definitions of milk, and thereby the definition of a mixture becoming prohibited. Now, we have certain cases which are under a biblical prohibition, certain cases which are under a rabbinical prohibition, certain cases which are under a maras ayin prohibition, and certain cases which are under no prohibition. Now, even if you say, well, I will never eat any type of meat and milk together, I don't care how it's defined according to halacha. As I said before, we're going to learn in this first siman that the isser of Basar beChalav isn't only by eating, but it's also by cooking and selling. And this is one of the most novel ideas in kashrus. in this set of halachas. There's no other chapter, no other subject, no other non-kosher substance that has this three-way prohibition, except for one.
Kaline? No,
Huh?
not Kaline. That's
Well, similar. Not. It's actually not. There's no Isser Bishul. Chametz. Okay. Chametz is quite severe. You can't make chametz either in Pesach, but nonetheless, this is the only one that has all three as an Isser D'Oraisa. You can't cook, you cannot eat, and you cannot sell. You cannot benefit from. So that's why it's important to know what falls under what. It's not just about what are you putting in your mouth. Even if you're a vegetarian, but maybe you own stocks in McDonald's. We probably and possibly own stocks in many companies that we have no clue about, especially if you have a pension plan by your employer that invests your money. It's your money that you will get in the future after you reach the age of retirement. That's invested in different portfolio stocks that may include companies that cook Basar beChalav. So it's important to know, when is this an issue, when is it not an issue, what mixtures consist of meat and milk halachically and which do not. So that's all in 87. 88, Peches. Chapter 88 discusses eating together. My wife likes milchiks, I like fleishiks, etc. Can we eat on the same table? So it discusses the different separations that are required when a person's eating on the same table with somebody else, one eating meat, the other eating milk. In a home in which many people have different types of cuisines that they enjoy, this may happen. So you need to know. Usually in restaurants it will not happen because no hashgacha will allow meat and milk in the same restaurant that I know of. But it can also happen if you're at a park. If you're at a park, you're sitting on a park picnic table, you pull out some pastrami and he pulls out a cheese sandwich. And he's a friend of yours and you start schmoozing. Can you sit and eat at the same table? Or do you got to do something about it? So that is chapter Peches. Peches also discusses in the end about sharing utensils between meat and milk. And this is where I need to insert something very important. For some reason, even if you go through in Smicha the entire Basar beChalav, let's say you learned this entire book, literally you learned this entire book that I'm holding in my hands right now, all the Mefarshim, everything. There are some very basic and glaring important subjects that you did not touch upon. In Basar beChalav. How that has happened, I don't know. It's not mentioned, okay? It's between the lines. It's not mentioned explicitly. The entire subject of how to keep a kosher kitchen is not mentioned explicitly anywhere in what we will be learning. And it's not mentioned in this book either. It's mentioned in this book in one line. You know what that line is? It's an introduction. For information regarding how to keep a kosher kitchen of Basar beChalav, buy the second book. It's in the book of Practical Laws of Basar beChalav. That's where it's discussed. Now, I can't put it in this book because if I put it in, Smicha students will say, hey, you gave us all this extra information we didn't have to learn. It's not on the test. It's true. So because of that, we have to make it into two different books. One is for the practical learning, one is for the Smicha learning, but in my class, we're going to do both. We're going to have to, it is completely strange and weird for a person to come out getting Smicha and Basar beChalav and not knowing the practical laws of how to run his kitchen. Makes no sense. Right? So we have a whole chapter in that book, chapter 7, dedicated just to that. We go through every single appliance, every single part of the kitchen, sinks, refrigerators, ovens, microwaves, dishwashers, you name it, and all the relevant laws of Basar beChalav, which includes, l'chatchila, do you have to have separate for meat and milk? In a time of need, can you use it for meat and milk? What happens if it was already used for meat and milk? Can it be kashered? How is it kashered? We go through all the different scenarios, a very important section that we will probably end up doing when we finish all the simanim, because then we'll have all the information we need to begin getting the answers that we need on our own for that subject. Okay, so that's Peches. So the end of Peches touches a little bit upon it, and that's as far as it goes pretty much. It talks about sharing salt shakers for both meat and milk. That's it. And cups. Doesn't talk about, at this point, doesn't talk about knives, doesn't talk about spoons, doesn't talk about forks, doesn't talk about sinks, doesn't talk about fridges, doesn't talk about ovens, etc. Peites, the next sin. Siman Peites is a very important and fun chapter. It discusses the laws of waiting between meat and milk. So we all know Jews hate two things. Jews hate eating bread and eating to bench, and Jews hate being fleshik. Being fleshik. So in this chapter, Peites, we will learn what is that all about. What's this being fleshik all about? We'll discover some very interesting new things. And for some reason, even after we learn all the different heterim in this chapter, I am sure none of you are going to actually do them. It's too ingrained in our conscience to do these heterim, to compromise in the waiting laws, even though the waiting laws is a minhag, it's a derabanan, but this is something that became ingrained in the Jewish people. But we're going to learn a lot of things that minadin are mutter, and everything has to do with waiting both between meat and milk and between milk and meat. That's also discussed in this chapter. In the end of the chapter of 89, it discusses knives, specifically knives, which again, you see, it's not so organized. Like there should be a chapter, like I did in my book, just on utensils. There isn't. We have salt shakers and cups at the end of 88 and knives at the end of 89. And that's it, it's over.
About the ovens.
About having a meat and milk oven?
No, about the old ovens.
Yeah, it's discussed in chapter 91. I agree with you, but it's just discussed in terms of having meat on top, milk on bottom. It doesn't go into having separate ovens.
Right.
So leaves us hanging on that. But don't worry, that's why I'm here. Chapter 90 is a chapter that we will not be learning in this course. It's the laws of Chal, the laws of a udder. Okay, that's with a D, U-D-D-E-R. For the simple reason that we don't eat it. Anyone here eat an udder? Eat udders? Chal. The udders are the breasts of the cow that give out milk. What? Did I spell it wrong?
No, I said they're utterly delicious.
Utterly delicious. Have you had them?
No.
I
don't know who would sell them.
You have to make a special order. Listen, between you and me, if you ask a sheikh, can you save me this part of the cow and I'll give you money for it, you'll get it. You can order whatever you want. There's no kashrus issue with the udder.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the neck to deal with. Chapter 90 deals with how do you deal with the udder. Let's not forget, today they work with a market, but back in the day, this was your cow. Now, you as a Jew, you're going to throw out a good edible udder to the garbage. Tashchis, it's money, right? So we wanted to make use of everything. There's also in the laws of Melicha. We learn about how do you salt the skull, how do you salt the brain, how do you salt the heart, how do you salt the spleen, how do you salt every part of the animal, including the reproductive organs. It was used, it was eaten. Today, we're rich, we're wealthy, they just throw everything out. They sell it to the Goyim. They sell it to the Chinese who eat everything that moves. So they have another market. They don't have to sell it to the Jews who are B'nai Malachim, princes. So it's not marketed. But if you make a special order, you can get it. There's a company in America that they get for you anything you order kosher, anything you want. So because it's not practical, we're not going to be learning it. Other smicha programs do require chapter 90. In this new edition, I have the whole chapter here. Chapter 90 is discussed, but we're not going to be, in my smicha course, I don't require students to learn it. Again, because as I said in the intro on Sunday, our focus is on halacha l'maaseh. And to take out 2-3 weeks in learning a subject that is not halacha l'maaseh is not the purpose of our course. So if you want to learn about it, you have a whole chapter here. We have pictures even. You say, look how delicious it looks. It looks good.
Yeah. Is it dairy?
Is it dairy, right? So that's the whole point. That's why there's a whole chapter. Why do we not have a whole chapter on eating heart in the laws of Basar? Because the udder is where the milk is. So if you end up just taking out the udder from the cow and cooking it, what have you just done? You've cooked meat and milk. So there's a way you have to know how to get rid of the milk from the udder. That's the whole idea of it. Okay. So as I said, chapter Tzaddik we'll leave for the Tzaddikim. We're not going to do. Chapter 91. From 91 until 97 is a bulk of chapters that can be generalized under one subject, and that is mixtures of meat and milk. Meat and milk have contacted each other. Till then, till this chapter, we've touched upon other subjects. We talked about how to define meat and milk, cooking them together, selling them. It can eat on the same table. When do you have to wait between them? Having the same utensils. Very basic subjects, which are, it's not that complex also. The subjects until now are not so complex. But once we begin chapter 91, this is when all the complexity of Basar beChalav really begins, when we have mixtures. Meat and milk mixes together. Now, how on earth do we have so many chapters on the same question? It should be one sif. Meat and milk mixes together. This is the law. Because there's many different types of mixtures. Okay, we have cold with cold. We have cold with hot. We have hot with hot. We have salted with unsalted. We have salted with salted. That's all 91. 91 deals with cold. Such as, for example, you open up your fridge. A shaila I received many years ago. A person opened up his fridge one morning to take out the milk, and he sees that the milk has spilled. Now, we always say don't cry over spilled milk, but in this case, he had good reason to. The chicken that his wife had just baked for Shabbos Thursday night was now saturated in milk. What's the halacha? The milk spilled into the chicken.
Was it cold?
Everything's cold in the fridge.
It is cold.
Yeah, nobody puts hot food in the fridge. You're not supposed to, at least, right? Everything's cold. So again, 91 is dedicated to cold with cold. But even with cold, sometimes even cold has a way to penetrate. So that's really chapter 91 deals with cold mixtures and how even sometimes cold can penetrate into another cold food.
Right?
Huh?
To get us a little bit, you came into the shaila to give us a little bit more hints of how we solved it. It's to do with time there, right?
So, and of course, soaking has to do with time. If it's one soaks in another, there's also other aspects that are discussed here. It touches also a little bit about hot foods, but the main subject of 91 is when cold touches cold, or when cold touches hot. Tal Gover, for example, is brought. But what you're touching upon is correct. This idea of kavush. But in 91, and it's also discussed that there's sometimes kavush can become usher even without any time, even in a second. So we'll learn. I don't want to spill the beans now. If I can reach you later on, so I'll just keep you in suspense for right now. Right.
Like a good television serial.
So that's 91. A lot of people that I know in Basar beChalav, they fulfill 91 literally. 91 stands for the word say. They give up. They leave in 91. They give up because it's a hard sermon. It's a hard chapter. Hopefully everybody here will be brave and courageous, and we won't have any deserters. I'll also try to make it very practical. For example, in all the malicha cases, which are very complex inside, we'll try to keep it to the basics of what is absolutely necessary to know, and especially if it's not so common, then we don't have to work so much on it, so much time. Tzadik Beis. Okay, Simon Tzadik Beis begins already with more about mixtures of cold falling into hot that's on a fire. Like if a drop of milk, you're drinking your coffee while making your fleshik cholent, never a good idea. And you dropped some into the cholent. Okay, so that's on the fire. So milk fell into hot meat. What do you do? So there's a whole bunch of cases involved here. How to determine the situation. What's the law if the drop of milk fell on the side of the pot, on the cover of the pot? So in the demo, we're actually going to be dealing with that a little bit. Now, I want to point out, in all these things that we're learning, there's a lot of lumdus. Lumdus means a lot of halachic acrobatics, a lot of opinions and a lot of svaras and back and forth. And this is the challenging part of learning halacha, but of smicha also. And that is to know how to not get lost in all of the acrobatics and debates and discussions, and something's a lot of fun going through and figuring everything out and what the shach says and what the tas says, and losing sight of knowing, bottom line, can the person who just asked me the shaila eat the piece of chicken? Can he or can he not? So we're going to take a middle road where we will give some of the exciting information, but as I said, we're gonna always have focus that we're in. Know that when we're in the forest, there are trees there. We're gonna know where we need to get to. Okay, that is chapter 92. It then discusses also the concept called Chanan, a big subject in Basar beChalav that means Katichas Natzas Nevela. I'll save the explanation of what that means for later. Okay, chapter 93. Chapter 93 deals with pots, okay? Fleishik pots, milchik pots, can you use it for the opposite? Can I cook fleishiks in a milchik pot? What happens if I did? Is it mutter? So let me just ask the question. Let's see what you guys would answer. Not you.
Okay.
I'll save you for last. A person went ahead and cooked and fried without onions, okay, but fried eggs with cheese in a fleishik frying pan that was just used to fry schnitzel.
I think it's strafe on both sides. It's hot. It's actually.
Everyone agrees it's strafe?
It didn't go overnight.
What went overnight?
No, he said just fried.
No, just fine.
Well,
Right, so
just is relative to the person saying that.
Okay.
So as a Rav, you have to ask the question, what do you mean just? How long ago? Oh, just within 3 days. So let's say it was within 3 days.
The size of the pot made a difference because it matters how much of the.
Let's say 2 days ago, okay, I fried schnitzel in this pot. I know I made a cheese on a fleishik pot. Can I eat the cheese?
So the question is, can you eat the cheese and what to do with it?
Guys, let's save the lump this for when we actually learn it. I want to see where you guys are holding. Can I eat this egg with cheese? Yes or no?
It's a fleishik pot.
From
hot.
2 days ago?
Yes.
You can eat it.
You can eat it?
I think.
No?
No.
Is the pot tray for kosher?
24
But if
In fact, it's the pot tray for kosher.
If the pot hasn't been used and it was cleaned properly, it was put aside, is more than 24 hours.
I'm going to have trouble with you, I see. You know too much.
So I did learn.
Right. Good. Okay, but isn't that strange? You're telling me that the pot's going to be treif, but the food's going to be kosher? I'd rather have the pot stay kosher and the food be treif. Tough. So that's what we learn in Tzaddik Gimel. Okay? That's 93.
You did know the cat.
Well, I've had this course before. I ordered it in Hebrew.
Tzaddik Daled. Tzaddik Daled deals with a specific case of one sticking a milchik spoon into a fleishik pot. You by mistake took the fleishik spoon and you put it into your cholent to mix it. Now what do? What's the deal with the spoon? What's the deal with the cholent? What's the deal with the cholent pot? Okay, in all cases the like. So that's in 94. So you see, they all sound very similar, and sometimes it's questionable why they were separated to different chapters exactly. But in general, there is a difference. As I said before, Tzaddik Aleph is mainly dealing with cold, then Tzaddik Beis deals with hot, but that's dealing with actual milk falling inside. Then Tzaddik Gimel, Tzaddik Daled starts dealing with utensils. So it is merging to different subjects as it progresses, but all dealing with the concept of mixtures. 94 also then deals with the concept of a davar gush. It deals with cases of cheese falling on different hot cheese falling on a pot, on a fleishik pot, etc. But just to know that Tzaddik Daled is the spoon chapter. Okay, Tzaddik Hey is a fun chapter. It's a little bit confusing. It's a very fun chapter, though. This deals with Nat Barnat. Nat Barnat is the concept of a food was cooked, a power food that was cooked in a fleishik or milchik pot. When does it receive a fleishik status that you cannot eat it with milk, and when not? That's basically what it talks about. So we're going to learn some interesting things over there. In the end, it then talks about you doing dishes. Back in the day, they didn't have dishwashers. They used to have a big pot that they would use to wash fleshik and milchik dishes. The question was asked, can you use the same one for the milchik dishes and fleshik dishes? Do you have to have different ones? So we're going to learn some interesting stuff there. And then Tzadik Vav. Tzadik Vav, the second to last chapter in Basar beChalav, deals with the topic of knives. If a person uses a fleshik knife to cut a power of food, what's the status now of the food? Can I use it? For example, I cut tomatoes with a fleshik knife. Can I serve it by a milchik meal? What do you guys say?
You cut tomatoes with a fleshik knife?
Can I serve it by a milchik meal?
Depends if
Cold tomatoes. Cold tomatoes.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
You said you can? You would honestly, you would honestly serve guests tomatoes cut with a fleshik knife when they're eating pizza and tell them that? We would feel comfortable doing that?
Well, but
Depending on what's the halacha says that there's not a problem.
Right. So we'll learn.
You are not allowed to do it.
Okay, so we're going to learn the difference between different vegetables cut by knives that are fleshik and milchik. There's difference between a type of charif, like an onion, garlic, etc., versus other things. And the point of my question before was to emphasize that not always what our Jewish conscience feels bad about is the halacha. Some people paskin from their conscience. So if it doesn't feel right, that means it's not okay. But we have to paskin from the books. That's what we have to paskin from. But just for a shalom bayis suggestion, I don't suggest serving onions cut with a fleshik knife to guests eating a milchik meal. You may get yourself into some trouble with that. I said tomatoes. Okay, never mind. That you can't do. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are acidic. Okay, so we'll see. We'll see what we'll learn in 96. We'll learn in 96. Coming up. Onions, for the record, is a big problem. That for sure you can't do. 97 then goes into the end of 96 then also deals with buying stuff from Goyim, buying fruits from Goyim, vegetables that were cut by Goyim. Can I go shopping in a store and buy horseradish before Pesach? How was the horseradish cut? Who cut it? With what knife? Horseradish is charif. Ever asked these questions? So the Charedes started marking it with the hashgacha. But in most places, there's no hashgacha. You just go to the market and you buy it, but they're not selling you the whole root. They're selling you a piece. Who cut it? How was it cut? If the guy just used his knife to slice himself a piece of hot bacon and then took it and sliced off the root, that's a big problem. When you're eating horseradish, you're eating something else on the Seder night as well. So this is a shayla that was inside the glove.
When he cuts his bread with it first.
Cut his bread.
And then the maror.
Oh, well, so everything dealing with chametz is in the laws of Archaim, laws of Pesach. That actually is not such a big problem. And then we'll learn that it follows the same laws in meat and milk. Anyways, 97 then deals with bread, kneading fleshik bread and milchik bread. Can you bake bread in the oven together with meat and milk? Can you knead it with milk inside? Can I add milk into the ingredients of my bread? Can I add fat, fleshiks, into the ingredients of my bread? And then in the end of 97, it deals with a little bit about ovens and baking bread in a fleshik oven, a milchik oven, and what its status becomes. And from there, we can have a discussion about beChalav pariv that is baked in a fleshik oven. What is its status? Okay, so that's the end of the overview. That's the overview of pretty much everything in Basar beChalav. So you've pretty much just learned everything in a very abstract way. We just went through the table of contents. That's pretty much what we did. We learned the table of contents. And so I want to do a demo on, I chose what I think I can arguably say is the most complex and difficult shaila in Basar beChalav that I think I've dealt with, because it deals with so many different angles and halachas throughout all the simanim. And so if you understand this, you're in good shape, because everything else is pretty much going to be a lot less complex. So the subject is as follows. It's a simple question. The question is not complex at all. It's a very simple question, but the answer is a little complex. The question is, and this is where I want to get I don't want to ruin the internet, but I want to get the thing on. Can we do that?
What do you want to do exactly?
I want to get the PowerPoint on.
I don't know. It's okay if you,
What's okay?
I don't know that you want to have a PowerPoint on this
Yeah,
computer.
so people can see, you guys can see it.
It'll interrupt it, but it's okay.
Uh-huh.
There's two people watching, and they won't be able to see the PowerPoint, obviously.
No,
Right?
they're not.
No. So
Why not?
it's a compromise. You think you can?
You could add the slide into the.
You know how to do it. Please come forward.
I don't know if I know how to do it.
I have no idea how to do that.
Try.
I've been pitch hitting for just for a beer for months now. He's gonna be disappointed with it.
He's on right now?
He's probably one of the 3 people watching.
Okay, let me, I have to first find it even here. Where it is. Oh, okay. You know what I think I'm gonna do? I have a great idea for the future. I can share with this computer the PowerPoint, and you can already then prepare it right away. It'll already be on the computer.
And pull it up as a file.
I'll share it. I'll pull it up. It'll already be on. It'll already be there for you to pull up.
Practice that a little bit.
Just click on a few buttons.
You could also put it like inside or put yourself inside.
The PowerPoint on my website, you're saying?
On the video, put the PowerPoint.
Can you use the PowerPoint on your nice heavy phone there instead? Is that possible?
I could technically. I
Why don't we
mean,
do
you'll
that?
have a hard time seeing it.
You can show closely. It's not.
Okay.
I mean, it's.
Let me open up. We don't have a lot of time left, anyways.
Yeah,
Okay,
let's
so the
let
subject-
people watch. Let's let them watch and have them do this. You can show and tell.
The subject of discussion is, as you see here in the picture, milk spilled onto meat. I'll tell you the shiloh that I received. The shiloh was a very simple shiloh, frying something milchik. And we all know that oil and water don't get along at all. You put them together, spritz. And this is what happened. Somehow there was a little bit of the spritz. They didn't get hurt. Baruch Hashem, they didn't get burned. But one of the spritzes of this milchik thing that they were making with oil landed straight on a fleshik pot. That's it. That's the case. A very simple case. So they want to know. They asked me, what's the halacha?
The place should not, that's
So Bittul Shishim matters. Bittul B'Shishim matters, and Bittul B'Rov in this case.
So to get to the answer here in the slideshow, we have to go through 15 slides. Yeah. So there's a number. So obviously, I can just cut to the chase and tell you what my final conclusion was, but I want to go through just for you to understand. And this is a good case because it goes through a lot of the different halachas here, throughout from Tzaddik Aleph until Tzaddik Vav. So the first thing that I asked him was your pot sitting on the fire? Was your flesh pot sitting on the fire? Because if it is, then it enters actually another subject, which is also complex, but is well discussed in chapter 92. And the answer is very clear over there. It says that we're going to learn chapter 92. If a drop of milk, and this is a good example of how a drop of milk would fall onto the outside of your pot. It spritzed onto it. You were baking or frying something, and some of the liquid or some of the gravy ended up spilling onto it. So if it spills on the outside of your pot, there are cases in which we say the food is treif, and there are cases in which we say that the food is kosher if it has 60 times the drop. And in all cases, we say the pot is treif. That's the bottom line.
Like the outside of the fleshik pot?
Yeah, it didn't fall inside. It fell on the metal
How are these
outside.
things being put on the
Have a
same
pot.
stove for? Why are they on the same stove to begin with? A little dangerous, no?
If everybody followed the party line and didn't make problems, I wouldn't get any shilas.
Mhm.
So if everybody would keep, safe and not cook fleshik and milchik together, it'd be out of business.
Mhm.
Because these people do, therefore we get all the shilas and we get to come up with these things, okay? I agree with you. Ideally, we never do it. We're very much. We never cook fleshik and milchik on the same stovetop together because of all these chashashes that can happen. But if it happened, or it can happen with you're drinking, as I said, drinking a coffee and a drop of it fell. So in all these cases that it's on the fire, that is not this case example. This case example was off the fire. But let me just clarify if it's on the fire. But that would be, as a Rabbi, that would be your first question. Where was this pot? Now, if the pot is on the fire, I actually no longer care of the fact that the milchik was on the fire. Because whether the milk was on the fire or not on the fire, the fleshig is on the fire, and it makes it hot. So it makes no difference what the state of the milk was.
The temperature of the pot was above.
It's hot, yeah, hot pot, boiling on the fire. Okay, so once I determine that, I no longer care about the heat of the milk. So what's the halacha in such a case where the pot is hot, even if it's off the fire but it's hot? So as I said before, the case we say everything's straight. The case we say that the food is kosher for 60 times, and in all cases the pot needs to be kosher. So that's bottom line. The pot would have to be kosher in that case. In a case that the drop fell, you want to finish off? Which case do we say? Okay.
Wait,
You want to finish off?
It went very fast.
Which case do we say that everything's treif?
When it falls the meat itself?
No. You're talking about tzaddik. You're in the beginning of tzaddik bays where it fall, where this piece of meat sticking out. I'm talking about it fell on the side, on the metal. Not the inside, the outside. It hit the outside of the pot. It didn't fall into, didn't contact the food inside at all.
There's fleshig food inside the other pot.
Yeah, but inside the pot.
Inside,
Not outside the pot.
The spritz of dairy hit the outside of the
Yeah,
pot.
hit the outside of the pot.
The question is, what do we do with the meat inside the pot and the pot itself?
Is the food kosher? Yeah.
Is the meat kosher and is the pot?
Is the pot of food kosher? We'd have to throw it down. So we're going to learn that there are cases we say it's batal b'shishin, as you are saying right now. And therefore the food is kosher, but nonetheless the pot will always be treif. We will learn why in tzaddik base. That's towards the end of tzaddik base. And there are cases where we don't say that. We say, no, the food's treif. And the basic difference is regarding where it fell. If it fell above food level or within food level. If it fell within food level, then
That's true.
then it's batal b'shishin. If it fell above food level, then we basically say the food's treif. We're going to learn. In a time of need, we're lenient. It is all on the outside, correct. And then there's also a difference if it's fell near the fire, meaning the pot is right now on the fire, and it fell in the area right across from the fire. Let's say it's a big fire that covers the whole pot on the bottom, or if the pot is covered. We're going to learn all the differences. But that case, I'm saying that's already that's explicit. That's an explicit case from the Shulchan Aruch. So a person who learns smicha would have the sources to right away give an answer.
If it fell in the pot,
This case,
if it fell in the pot,
there's also different cases in that. That is not our case, but
Okay.
that's also 92, chapter 92 at the beginning.
Matter of the difference, Harry.
It doesn't matter. This is milk itself. This is actual milk falling, or oil that was cooked together with cheese. Okay, so let's move on to the actual case. No, the pot was an innocent pot. It wasn't being cooked. It wasn't cooking. There wasn't even anything inside of it.
There was somebody coming. I just realized.
Oh.
Go ahead.
There was nothing in the pot. So this enters us into the question of what happens, what is the status of a flow from a hot food to a cold food or a cold item. Now, the general case of discussion in 91, so let me before I say that, let me just say as follows. Whenever we get a shiloh of taruvas, shiloh of a mixture that happened, we have to ask ourselves the question. According to halacha, was a bridge created which allowed taste of the milchik to enter the fleshik, or taste of the fleshik to enter the milchik, depending on what the case is. Let's say it was a fleshik soup that spilled, that spritzed onto a milchik pot. Okay, so we have to go into the halachic definition of the bridge. When is a bridge halachically considered to have been created that allows then the taste to travel into the other side and trafe it up? And when do we say there was contact, it looks super bad, but according to halacha, nothing happened? This is what we call dry punches. No one got hurt. Okay? So this is the whole game of Tzaddik Aleph and onwards, understanding what halachically is consistent of a bridge. Now, usually we say heat. Heat. If there's heat and there's liquid, you have a bridge, and therefore hot milk falls on cold meat, or hot meat falls on cold milk, you have a bridge. There is transference of taste. Now, simplistically, that is a correct statement, but it's not that simple. Why is it not that simple? Because not all heat, according to halach, is defined as heat. So even after we've defined what makes a bridge be considered a bridge to transfer taste, we now have to define what those aspects are. So when we say heat is one of them, what does heat mean? What is hot? So we all know yatzeh this is heat. Okay, so my first question to them was, do you assess that the oil, when it spritzed, was yatzeh ledus, by the time it hit the pot. Because if the answer is no, then we can already decide now, Yatzeledes, that's 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Everyone agrees that there must be a minimum level of heat for something to transfer taste.
110 Fahrenheit, 90 degrees?
No, what, Celsius?
45.
44, yeah, 45. Okay, about 44, 45. So again, we agree that heat is one of the components necessary to create a bridge. If it's cold with cold, then in general the rule is it looks bad, but nothing happened. Wash it and move on with life and eat it, okay? There's no transfers of taste because there was no heat involved. So what's the definition of heat? So that's not complex at all. Yatzeledes, that's agreed upon by all poskim. The Yatzeledes is the minimum. So that was my first question. And he said, no, it was for sure Yatzeledes, which I assumed it was because it was in a boiling hot pot. And we know oil is able to reach 500 degrees Celsius, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, much hotter than water. So for sure, by the time that spritz hit the pot, it was for sure Yatzeledes, no question. So, but if you were to say it wasn't, then everything is okay. Wash your pot and move on with it. Because your pot is cold. Your pot's not on fire. Your pot is cold. And you had what halachically is defined as a cold drop of milk hit a cold pot.
On the outside.
On the outside. Yeah, so, yeah.
Well,
It looks bad.
Inside's
Wash it.
worse. Inside's worse. It's cold.
No, if it's cold and cold, again, wash it.
It's a little piece of something that's like on top of the meat, maybe though. With a bit of shisha.
We will learn in 91 with cold falling onto cold meat, cold milk and cold meat. And that's the case I told you in the fridge. Open the fridge, so there's milk spilled into the chicken. We'll learn when we say it's a problem and when not. It's not always we say it's a problem. It's not always we don't. It depends. Okay? Getting back to our case where it's sprayed. So he said that it is Yatzeledes. So now I have to determine, okay, so now I got the facts straight. Now I got to get the halachas straight. We all know from Hilchos Shabbos of the concept called Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Kli Shlishi, right? We're all very aware. We know that one person can make a tea and have to bring a $500 cow to the temple, and another person can make a tea and enjoy it and have to do anything. Why? Why does this guy have to now bring a carbon chatas because he made a tea on Shabbos, and I get off the hook? Because he did it in a way that transgresses the laws of cooking. Now, he may argue, but come on. Is there really a difference in his tea and my tea? It tastes the same. It tastes the same exact thing. Is there honestly a difference from a cuisine perspective if I placed my tea directly into the Kli Rishon, or I put the tea bag in an Iri Kli Rishon, or I did it in a Kli Sheni or Kli Shlishi? From a cuisine perspective, do you taste a difference? No. But nonetheless, in halacha, we see that different levels of heat have different cooking powers. So while it is a biblical prohibition on Shabbos to pour hot water from the urn into your tea, that's a biblical prohibition of cooking. It would be permitted if you poured the hot water into a cup and then poured it from that cup into another cup with tea inside, or that you put the tea in it afterwards. Iri Kli Sheni or Kli Shlishi. That demotion from one cup to the next removed its cooking ability. Now, do we say the same thing also when it comes to kashrus? For example, I made myself a coffee. Now, most people don't drink coffee from the pot. They don't cook coffee in the pot and then put milk in and drink it. They pour the coffee into a cup, which would automatically make the hot coffee what? A Kli Sheni. So the milk I just poured into the cup with the hot coffee is now Kli Sheni milk, not Kli Rishon milk. What happens if that milk spilled onto my friend's steak? Just a drop. So if there's shishim, hot steak. Oh, let's say cold steak. Okay, cold steak. Not Yatzeledes steak. Non-Yatzeledes steak. Below Yatzeledes steak. Okay.
You don't feel the steak.
Oh, that's called Iri Kli Sheni. Right. So Iri Kli Sheni took place here. Very good.
But the meat is considered a
no, let's just say the meat here is below Yatzeledes. So the meat here is hot, then we enter another discussion. As I said, I want to go in order of the complexities. I don't want to mix two complexities together. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that the meat itself is not hot enough to cook anything. It's not Yatzeledes. So the meat is fine. Okay, the question is from the milk. Drinking a hot coffee, it's very hot coffee. It's in a Kli Sheni. You just pour the hot water in, just put a little bit of milk. The question is, does milk from Kli Sheni heat, have ability to trafe something up? If we look in the poskim and we say it's cold, then since the steak was not yatziledis, it looks terrible. He's eating a nice hot steak, not yatziledis, but it's hot, it's warm, and hot milk straight from the cup fell on it. All he has to do is pick it up and wash it and move on. If we would determine it to be cold. If we were determine it to be hot, then there's a bridge. There's a bridge.
It means the steak.
Not the milk. If we were to determine the milk, if we were to determine that the kli sheni milk is still defined as hot, according to halacha, then there's a transference of milk into the steak.
Kashrus.
And kashrus. And if the meat, and if the meat does not have 60 times versus it, then, and sometimes even if it does, we'll learn there is a prohibition here, either the klipa or the whole thing comes out. So we'll learn. We'll discuss after. We'll discuss when we go through. But bottom line is that then there would be a shiloh. So that's what's very important to determine what the status is of kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi. So this one I'm discussing right now is actually not explicitly discussed in Basar beChalav. So you can learn the whole Basar beChalav and get this question, you won't know how to answer. I'll tell you even more. Not only is it not discussed, the little bit of it that is discussed is extremely misleading. So you will actually, at best, give a wrong psak in this case because of what you learned in Basar beChalav, which is really borrowing from its main subject of discussion in laws of Taruvas, which is the next neighborhood over here. That's where this is discussed in length. So if you haven't learned the laws of Taruvas, you may have misconceptions about the rules of kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi. Bottom line is explained as follows. It's a huge dispute amongst Rishonim. Some say the laws of cooking and the laws of transferring are synonymous. So just like kli sheni can no longer cook, your kli sheni you can even pour on tea on Shabbos, it can't cook, so it can't transfer taste. Others say no. Cooking is one thing, giving taste is another thing. They're two separate things. And therefore it's possible for taste to be transferred even if cooking hasn't occurred. And according to that approach, it would end up that this piece of meat has a kashrus question.
It wasn't 60 times.
Even if it is, because it's cold, it would have to have kedei klipa removed. Not always does 60 times work. 60 times only works in a case where the milk is absorbed completely. But if the milk only absorbs into a peel's worth of the product, then how can I say 60 times the product nullifies the milk when the milk didn't spread to 60 times of the product? It only spread to the first layer. So in this case, since the meat is cold here, not yet to lettuce, we would say that the layer of the meat has to be removed. So we just lost a layer of his steak.
That's all.
Well, that's all.
You gotta do something.
Yeah, but if we would rule that way, I didn't say we do. It's a machlekes, okay? It's a machlekes. So that's I'm just showing you how you would have to navigate your way in the shaila of figuring out how everything was. In this case of discussion,
So if both is cold, then you just wash it off.
in a case where it's cold, hitting cold, then ideally you just wash it off. As I said before, there's a case in 91 where we'll learn cold milk and cold meat can make the meat treif. We're going to learn about that. There's a specific case, but in general, that's the halacha. A drop of milk fell on meat, everything's cold, just wash it off.
You gotta say cold in quotes here, right? Because cold.
Cold really means less than yatziledis. It doesn't mean literally
Doesn't
cold.
mean refrigerator.
But if it got demoted for the purpose of transfer.
Correct. So right. So
the
that's
value
why
would be
exactly.
temperature.
That's what I'm saying. So you have to know the definition of what heat means according to halacha. Now in this case, this was not a case of a cliche. This was a case that it went straight from the frying pan. It wasn't a cup of coffee. It went from the frying pan, straight from the frying pan and hit the fleshik pot. But then we have another concept. We have a concept called nifsak hakiluach. It's like this. Let's go back to Shabbos laws. If I open the spout on Shabbos, poured the hot water into my tea leaves, I transgress the biblical prohibition of cooking. Given. What if I lift it up? What if I put the cup on the floor? I put it on the floor. And I open up the spout just for a second. And by the time the water dribbled down and hit my cup, it had nothing to do anymore with the urn. It wasn't connected to the urn. The stream wasn't connected. This is called nifsak hakiluach, which is in essence what happens by every spritz or spray. When the oil sprayed from the milchik pot onto the fleshik pot, was there a stream? There was a line? No, it was a dot that flew. He's on his own. He's a missile. Do milchik missiles have ability to destroy, to aser, fleishiks? That's the question. Now, in halacha, this is an extremely obscure subject. How do we judge a case of nifsek hakiluach? Some say we actually give it the same law as a klisheni. And a klisheni, they say, has a law that it can't transfer taste just like it can't cook. And therefore, they say everything's kosher. Meaning some place can say that in this case, the pot remains kosher. It's good. Others say no. Even if we were to say nifsek hakiluach has a law of a klisheni, some place can say klisheni is no good. That does have ability to transfer taste. And some place can say that nifsek, they argue on the premise. Say, no, even if the stream has ended, it doesn't mean it doesn't have ability to transfer taste. They say it still does. It can't cook, but has ability to transfer taste. So based on all this, on all these different opinions, in this specific case, what I ruled to him was that the pot is kosher. He doesn't have to do anything to it. If he wants, though, he can kasher it. I'm not going to go into why I ruled leniently in this case. There's other reasons as well. But in this specific case, that's how I ruled it. If it, let's say, fell on a piece of meat, I would have ruled stringently to it. It's as if it's a case of meat versus a pot, then it would have been more stringent.
Were you lenient because of the nifsek, the airborne issue?
Oh, of course, that was a major premise. If not for that, I would never be able to be lenient halachically. But also, according to halacha, as we're going to learn, is this a biblical doubt or a rabbinical doubt? This case. This question that he's asking, is he asking a question of that there's a biblical prohibition, there's a biblical meat and milk mixture that has taken place here, or only a rabbinical?
It should be rabbinical because biblical is always lechum, and rabbinical can be.
Exactly. So why is this case only rabbinical? That's why I was lenient. Because meat and milk mixtures are only prohibited biblically if they have been cooked derech bishul. They have been cooked together in the way of cooking. Is spritzing milk onto a pot the way of cooking? So that's why it's a rabbinical case. And also it doesn't cook. It didn't cook. It's only transfers of taste that happen, not cooking. In any event, this is one of the reasons. But this is a case that you will probably learn again after we learn everything, and then you'll be able to clearly see and put things together.
You didn't say anything about the aspect of this case, but obviously if there was a danger here, this has the power. The speck of dairy grease has the power to penetrate the outside of a wall of a pot to go inside.
That's really the question. Does it? Did it penetrate the pot? If it did, then the pot's treif.
Okay, but in general, there is a case where it can penetrate. It can hit it outside, and it can penetrate.
If it's on the fire, absolutely. Yeah. If the pot is hot, then even cold milk that fell in it can penetrate.
The fact that it wasn't your case wasn't.
It wasn't on fire, and it was cold pot. Yeah.
So then it couldn't have transferred anyway.
Well, if the missile is hot, maybe it can. That's the discussion. Okay, Mitzvah next week. I would like to begin from inside. Chapter 89. We will begin with a general introduction into the reasons behind Basar beChalav, as is explained in the book, and we'll preface the first sif that's learned. So thank you everybody for coming. Anyone who would like to sign up, if I don't have yet your application form, you need to send it. Okay, and whoever didn't work out tuition with me needs to work it out before I can sign them up.
It looks like
I think this is. Let me see.
You can cover the navigation of the website questions I sent you at some point. There was a few questions I had.
I didn't see any questions that you
I
sent.
sent it to the WhatsApp, your family's WhatsApp.
Okay, yeah, if anybody has questions, I'll be happy to take them.